Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The government has suggested that any extension to the Brexit transition period should be by about 3 months. The Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, also called on Conservatives to pull together as a team and hold their nerves. Here's our political correspondent, Chris Mason.
People's vote! Now!
A day on from this, hundreds of thousands of marchers demanding another referendum on Brexit. Today, it's back to the political slog of trying to reach a deal with the European Union, and a slog accompanied by a noisy soundtrack of grumbles from the Conservative backbenches. So the Brexit Secretary pleads...
It's understandable that there are jitters on all sides of this debate. We need to hold our nerve. The end is in sight in terms of a good deal, the prize we want, a good deal with the EU.
And those jitters go something like this when you stare across the channel.
This withdrawal agreement is almost ready, but we still have to fix the question of the Irish border. And we have to have a definitive answer, or at least no temporary measures which disappear, and we don't know what to do after that.
The current plan, if there's a withdrawal agreement with Brussels, is for a transition period after Brexit, lasting until the end of 2020. But the government accepts that might now have to be longer, as it thrashes around for a plan it and the EU can live with to keep the border with Ireland open. Ministers are suggesting a so-called backstop where all of the UK stays in a customs arrangement with the EU until the government decides not to. But that, Mr Raab said, could come after an extension to the transition period of 3 months or so.
It's an obvious possible route, but as long as it's short, perhaps a few months, and secondly, that we know how we get out of it. And obviously it has to solve the backstop issue so that that falls away then as a possibility.
If a deal is done with the EU, it'll need to be approved by Parliament, and given some on her own side don't like what's being cooked up by the government, the Prime Minister might need some Labour MPs to vote for it. But
we're not going to accept that this argument that it's either my deal or no deal, because on that logic, you would be putting to me that the Labour Party should back anything the Prime Minister brings back.
And the slog continues, and it gets noisier by the week. Chris Mason, BBC News. Ben, frankly, reporting on Brexit sometimes can feel rather like standing in front of a glacier and excitedly talking about how fast it's moving. Yes, in the long term that might be the case, but day to day it doesn't always feel like that, and today was one of those days. But the Prime Minister will be in front of the Commons tomorrow, facing questions after last week's summit. Technical level negotiations involving civil servants continue in Brussels too. And all of this as some Conservative backbenchers get frustrated at the slow pace of progress and, frankly, get frustrated with the Prime Minister.
All right, Chris, thank you very much indeed. Chris Mason, our political correspondent.
The Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, has acknowledged Tory jitters over Brexit and called on MPs to hold their nerve and play as a team. Opponents of the Prime Minister's current plan to extend the transition phase yet further say it looks like capitulation. But Mr Raab insisted with a time limit it was the way forward to a deal that he still thought the UK could achieve. Here's our political correspondent, Romilly Weeks.
The Prime Minister returned from Brussels last week with no deal and with an idea that horrified many in her party. Today, the Brexit Secretary confirmed that, yes, the transition period where the UK continues to follow EU rules could be extended if the EU drops its insurance policy for avoiding a hard border in Northern Ireland.
It's an obvious possible route, but as long as it's short, perhaps a few months, and secondly, that we know how we get out of it. And obviously it has to solve the backstop issue so that that falls away then as a possibility.
Currently, the transition period will last until the end of December 2020. But now the UK and the EU are discussing whether to extend that. Although the UK government says any extension would only be for a matter of months, EU leaders have already suggested the extension would not replace the backstop, which ensures against the return of a hard border in Ireland, but could be in addition to it. Today's front pages with lurid suggestions that Mrs May's political life is on the line give a pretty good indication of how that idea is being received by the Brexit wing of her party. Others regret the way it's being expressed, but agree there can be no more compromise.
I don't like that language. I think it's wrong. I think it's very bad of colleagues to say things like that. We should be united. We should support the Prime Minister, but the Prime Minister equally has to understand that we cannot go on and on compromising and looking like we are on the run. She has to be bold and strong and show that she has a clear view of where Britain is going, either with an agreement with the EU or going it alone without any deal.
It's set to be another turbulent week in here for the Prime Minister, with her more Brexit-minded backbenchers scenting blood. The EU wants a level of compromise that her party just won't allow her. Sometime and soon, something's got to give. Romilly Weeks, ITV News, Westminster.
I've been